How do you decide when you sell the stock?
Well, it depends what's the source of your value. In some of the example that I stated, the source of the value, it really is the asset value. And in that case, you really want to really reevaluate your scenarios upside and downside every once in a while because the situation changes. For example, in your favorite stock in the Russian oil, the local oils, and Gazprom, I sold it 2 years after I first bought it. And it just but at the time they're still kind of trading probably 90%, 80 to 90% discount. But I think the 80-90% discount is warranted somehow. Today they're still trading at a huge discount. I don't know what it is. You're probably more updated than I do. But relative to all the other countries, that I would feel less comfortable with that discount. I need more. And it just happened to be given a 99% discount, 99.5% discount. That was a fluke. Yeah. Now, if you're really talking about earnings, I tend to be less in a hurry. Because if you really bet it right, the earning will continue to grow. And if the asset, underlying asset continue to grow on a compounded basis, I would say that is a reason to be less in a hurry to sell. If they reflect in the fair value, I would keep it. But if they really go to the extreme overvalue situations and the business environment changes, of course you do change your course of action.
I was wondering, what is the margin of safety that you look for before you decided to buy?
Yeah. Again, that has something to do with the quality of the asset you're buying. If the quality of the asset is very high, your demand on the asset basis is low because you are demanding that a margin of safety on the upside in terms of the earning generating power. Whatever it is, you have to have an insight as to what this asset can generate for you. And somehow it is somewhat of a different insight, a unique insight. Whether you know the business particularly better than anybody else's, if you really buy into the future earnings, or the asset, for whatever reason, you can withstand the balance sheet better than the other people. You have to have a better insight as to what is the appropriate value. And therefore, it may not really appear to other people as a large enough of a margin, but in your mind, you have a very, very large margin of safety. In my own case, I just think that the larger you can get it, the better. You want to have a very, very large margin of safety.
Right. So how about assuming that you have no insights whatsoever as to what the future earnings power is, and you just assume that it's a no-growth business? What would you pay for that business?
Well, in the case of that Russian, since I know very little about Russian, I have every reason to be suspicious. So that goes to 99%, and I get extremely uncomfortable when it goes to 80%, for example. So in each situation is different, but in the environment, I understand the external forces. I understand the management. I understand the general business practice in that particular culture. You would probably, 70, 80% is actually pretty good. It's all situation specific.
Okay, I just have to say that that's a pretty high hurdle rate.
Well, that's why you don't have to. My whole point is you don't have to swing a lot. One of the key of a success for being a long-term successful investor is you have to endure a long period of time in which you do nothing. You don't have to do a lot in order to be fabulously rich and prosperous. That's the good thing about this game. You study all the time, but you don't have to do anything. And every time you do, when you don't have enough margin of safety, you can come out really losing. And that's really much worse than really than doing nothing. But every time you do something, if you have large enough of margin of safety, your upside is also becoming huge. And there are many, many examples, and I wouldn't have time to go into it, and in which when you turn out to be right, the upside is just enormous. It could really surprise your wildest dreams. And you want to wait for those fat pitches most of the time.
I'm curious to hear your opinion on what you think are the domestic industry segments you think are most overvalued and undervalued today.
To be a successful investor, you don't really have to know everything. You don't have to be a Kramer who claims he knows everything, every stock. In fact, that if you truly know something, they tend to really fall into a small circle. Buffett would like to, Munger would like to call it a circle of competence. You would find in your circle, that circle tends to be small. So every time you hear people talking about, oh gee, I think that industry is overvalued, this industry is undervalued, that is not intellectually honest to me, at least. Investing, the last thing you want is to have that air of error. Arrogance might be a too strong word, but I think the more honest you are intellectually, the more prosperous you tend to be. I have never found any intellectually arrogant people who can successfully practice the game of the investment.
Yes. How do you find these great dislocations where things are trading at 10% of what they're worth?
Well, I find, as I look at my own career, of all the ideas that I find, they really tend to come from all sources. I don't have a particular rule where they come from. If you have a curious mind, if you study all the time, and you maintain a good network of relationship with other smart, intelligent investors, you tend to find a lot of a source of interesting ideas. And in today's age, because this regulatory requirement was disclosure, I wouldn't be surprised you can really find a lot of great ideas just out of reading publicly available information. It is judging what is a good opportunity that is really difficult.
What's the process like of you finally develop conviction in ideas?
One of my favorite ways to describe the conviction of idea is that if you can find the most intelligent person who would oppose your idea, and you're able to argue more successfully than he does against your idea, that is when you can develop or entitled to some views. And even then, you want to really confine yourself to a small segment of things that you think you're right. And of course, as you gain more experiences, your circle tends to expand, but only small and gradually over time. So I think of being intellectually honest is a huge requirement of being a successful analyst and a successful investor.
I wanted to ask you a question about portfolio construction, and last session there was a lot of discussion about diversification and the importance of it. My sense is that you're more of a concentrated investor. Some other investors are like that. Where does that, what kind of role does diversification play, or how do you think of it in building a portfolio?
Well, you always have to have some kind of a diversification. Because A, you could be wrong, and B, even if you're right, you're betting on statistics. In other words, the future is essentially a distribution of all probabilities. Say you have a 90% conviction, and you're right, that event is 90%, but then 10% chance it happened. And so you don't want to that 10% to get you out of the game. So you do need to diversification. On the other hand, that recognizing is extremely rare to find no-brainer great opportunities. Extremely rare. In fact, you have to wait for a long time before the fat pitch to come to you. So when that happens, you certainly do not want to diversify away the opportunity that you have been waiting patiently for a long time to discover for some really inferior other opportunities. So investment is essentially an opportunity cost. So one other alternative have to really justify itself by comparing with the one you already have. And so when you make that comparison, you tend not to really diversify too much. You would find a few very, very good ones that have a very high conviction and let it rise. And so yes, you do a little bit of both.
So in that example, in a very high conviction idea, what do you feel the limits are in terms of, how much you could be invested and what considerations do you have for that?
Well, I would say, as I said, that all decisions ought to be looked through the concept of opportunity cost. Is what else can I do with the cash I have? And cash, by the way, is really a fundamentally important asset. And if I don't really find anything else, or if I find a bunch of other opportunity inferior to cash, then I would keep it in cash. It never bothers me to hold a large amount of cash if I can't find great opportunities. At the same time, when I find, say, one good idea, I'll let it be a little bit bigger percentage of the portfolio. And sometimes holding cash can be the result of a bottom-up research. I always believe that's the case. Okay, well, thank you very much and good luck.